Jane Austen is one of the most important novelists in the history of English literature because the time in which she was writing, it marked the transition from the Romantic era to the Victorian era, and she has effectively represented this transition through an apt portrayal of characters, their issues in life, and the socio-economic realities. Considering that she is so important in the history of English literature, you will find that at least one question is asked related to her life or her works in almost every UGC NET English exam. Now, having heard that, if you are wondering how to approach Jane Austen or her works for this particular exam, then this video is just for you. So, stay tuned till the end of this video and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Jane Austen was born on 16th December 1775 in the Hampshire village of Steventon. Now, since she was born in the countryside, she was exposed to the intellectually stimulating and a lively environment of family and friends, which basically constituted of landed gentry and the clergy of the countryside. Because of which you will find that in a lot of her novels, she has tried to emphasize, interpret, and even critique the English landed gentry at the end of the 18th century. Not only that, but living in that particular environment of the countryside, listening to the conversations of the landed gentry, she was motivated to write at a very young age. In fact, she started writing short stories and poems at the age of 7, and ever since, she has enjoyed quite a productive literary career, which has resulted into the publication of 6 important novels. However, there were a few periods in her life where she did not feel like picking up her pen. She faced this lack of motivation, particularly when she and her family relocated to Bath to live there for a few years. In fact, what happened was that she had started to write a new novel but abandoned it in a few days itself. The title of that particular novel was The Watsons, and it was about a clergyman and his 4 unmarried daughters. Possibly she abandoned it because she did not have the muse of her countryside. Now, The Watsons was not the only unfinished novel of Jane Austen. Another unfinished novel by her is titled as Sanditon, which was originally titled as The Brothers. She wrote 12 chapters of this book with the protagonist as Diana Parker. She left it unfinished, this time not because she was not motivated, but because of her ill health, and later she was diagnosed with Addison's disease, which led to her untimely and unfortunate death on July 18, 1817. Having discussed the basic details of Jane Austen's life, let's shift our attention towards some of the most important works written by her. In this video, we are going to discuss the 4 most important novels of Jane Austen in detail, which are frequently asked in UGC NET English exam. Her first important novel is Sense and Sensibility. It was the first published novel of Jane Austen, published in 1811. This novel was published anonymously. So, when it was initially published, instead of crediting it to Jane Austen, it was credited to by a lady. Not only that, but when Jane Austen started writing this novel somewhere in 1795, she initially titled this novel to be Eleanor and Marian, who are the primary female characters in this particular novel. Eleanor and Marian are the Dashwood sisters who represent common sense and emotionality, respectively. Now, what happens in this particular novel is that the plot begins after their father passes away. And so the 3 of them, that is the Dashwood sisters and their widowed mother, they're forced to leave their family estate and move to Barton Cottage. That's where the entire plot begins, because that's where Eleanor meets Colonel Brandon and Marian meets Edward Ferrara, their respective love attachments. They marry each other after a lot of twists and turns. The entire novel is set in southwest England, London and Sussex, somewhere between 1792 and 1797. The second most important and the most loved novel of Jane Austen is Pride and Prejudice. It was published in 1813, and when she sat down to write it in somewhere around 1796, she originally titled it as The First Impressions. The entire plot of the novel surrounds the Bennet family. So you have Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, who have 5 unmarried daughters, and Mr. Bennet is the owner of the Longbourn estate in Hertfordshire. But the thing is that he cannot pass this estate to a female heir. He can only pass it to a male heir. Since they don't have a male heir, they are trying to find a suitable husband for their 2 eldest daughters so that they could pass that particular estate to a particular husband. Now, who are these 2 eldest daughters? They are Jane Bennet and Elizabeth or Lizzie Bennet, who is the female protagonist of this particular novel. Now, Jane Bennet falls in love with Charles Bingley, who had initially come to visit the Netherfield estate near Longbourn. And his friend Fitzwilliam Darcy is the male protagonist of this novel. The novel opens with one of the most famous lines in English literature, which reads, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune is in want of a wife." The plot of this novel really begins when all of them meet at a ball. Jane and Charles Bingley hit a romantic note on their very first meeting. But Lizzie and Darcy? Not very much. In fact, their very first meeting is so bitter because Darcy is behaving in a very arrogant and cold manner, which leaves Lizzie a bit shocked. But then, after a couple of twists and turns and exposing the true nature of villain Wickham, and a couple of proposals by Darcy, one of which is accepted by Lizzie, all of them share a happy ending with each other. Jane is paired up with Charles Bingley and Lizzie is paired up with Darcy. The next important novel that we are going to discuss of Jane Austen in this video is Mansfield Park. It was her 3rd novel published in 1814. The plot of this novel is quite simple. It is centered around the female protagonist Fanny Price, and her family is quite overburdened with the poor socio-economic realities, because of which they send her to live with her aunt and uncle at the age of 10. The entire plot follows the storyline of her childhood to her early adulthood, talking about how she's treated so poorly by the Bertrams. Sometimes she is used to run errands, and she is also provided a very small attic bedroom for her to live. Her chief love interest is Edmund, because he is the only one in the entire novel who is showing her a bit of kindness. And like all her novels, Edmund and Fanny, they end up marrying each other. But this novel acquires a special place in English literature because of one very important fact. What is this important fact? The Bertrams gain a lot of wealth from a West India estate in Antigua, which is basically alluding to the plantations. Now, it is a very important fact to note that Antigua was a British colony from 1632 onwards, and a lot of plantations were grown during that particular time, which alludes to the question of slavery and also a lot of economic exploitation of the colonies. The last published novel of Jane Austen is Emma. It is a comedy of manners which was published in December 1815. It is set in the fictional town of Highbury and other surrounding estates including Randalls, Donwell Abbey and more. Now, when we are talking about the protagonist of this particular novel, it is the most famous Emma Woodhouse. While talking about this particular heroine and the novel, Jane Austen said that I am going to take a heroine whom no one but myself will much alike. Now, why was Jane Austen compelled to mention this particular thing? So, up until now, we knew that the heroines of each and every novel of Jane Austen are quite genuine, innocent, and simple. Emma Woodhouse is also very beautiful, she's smart and witty. But then she is also very troublesome and meddlesome in other people's affairs. She is convinced that she is not going to marry, but she has this overconfidence in her matchmaking abilities. She feels that she is an excellent matchmaker. That results into certain romantic misadventures in this particular novel. Over the course of the novel, Emma befriends Harriet Smith, a 17-year-old student with an unknown parentage, and she decides that Harriet Smith is the best match for Mr. Elton. After repeated advices by his friend Mr. Knightley that Emma, don't do this, she does not listen to anybody. But then she also later realizes that Harriet Smith is in love with Robert Martin, a young farmer. But then Emma dissuades her from being in relationship with him and tells her that for her the best match is to be Mr. Elton. But wait for the twist in the tale, because Mr. Elton later reveals that he is actually in love with Emma. And the complications arise when two new characters arrive, Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill. It is only towards the end that the truth is revealed, which is that both Harriet Smith and Emma are secretly in love with Mr. Knightley. That's when Emma realizes that it is best not to meddle in anyone's affairs or to be a matchmaker that she thought herself to be. Mr. Knightley proposes and confesses to Emma that he is also in love with her. But what about Harriet? Harriet also realizes that her true love is Roger Martin. And so the novel ends with 3 marriages. The first marriage between Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill, the second between Emma and Mr. Knightley, and third between Harriet and Roger Martin. These were the 4 important novels published by Jane Austen during her lifetime. After she died, 2 other novels were also published posthumously. The first one was Northanger Abbey, published in 1817, and it is a coming-of-age novel with the protagonist as Catherine Morland. Not only that, but one of the most interesting facts about Northanger Abbey is that it is a satire of Gothic fiction, a satire of Gothic novels, especially novels like Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho. The second posthumously published novel of Jane Austen was Persuasion, again published in 1817. It is basically centered around the love story of Anne Elliot and Captain Frederick Wentworth. These were some of the most important novels written by Jane Austen that are extremely significant from UGC NET point of view. Several questions have been asked related to Jane Austen and her works in this particular exam, so make sure that you go through her life and understand these works in detail before you appear for your UGC NET English exam. Apart from Jane Austen, some of the most important novelists include Sir Walter Scott, Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, and more. If you want to understand their lives, understand the context in which they were writing, and also understand their works in detail, don't worry, I've got you covered. In my live classes for UGC NET English exam preparation, I am covering the history of British English literature and Indian English literature in a very detailed and simplified manner. I am breaking down some of the most important authors, writers, poets, dramatists, and their works in a very simplified manner, which will help you understand and get a clearer idea when it comes to UGC NET English exam. Not only that, but I'm also breaking down complex concepts and topics related to literary criticism, which will provide you the confidence to ace this particular exam. The best part about these sessions, these are live one-on-one sessions, which means that I can provide you personalized guidance and share feedback tailored to your needs and requirements, trying to fill the possible gaps in your UGC NET English exam preparation. If you want to know more about the courses I offer, the sessions I take, and the notes I provide, feel free to check out my TopMate page. It's topmate.io/Riya Gandhi. I've shared the link in the description box below, so don't forget to check it out. That's it for today's video, folks. If you found this video on Jane Austen and her works informative and helpful, please like it and share it with other UGC NET English aspirants. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any videos that I will be uploading on such important literary figures and texts in the future. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one.